Okay, this is our cooking for food science, and now that I've washed my hands and cleaned up my area, we're gonna make some pizza dough today. So first we have our ingredients. We have 2 cups of flour, a 1/4 cup wheat germ, a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of honey, and a 1/4 ounce of yeast. So first, what I already started in order to get the process going, we mixed our yeast with a cup of warm water to help it start to procreate. So yeast is a eukaryotic organism, and it has to be put in warm water in order for it to grow and start reacting. So the yeast is a leavening agent that once we put it in our dough, it's going to help the doughs rise, and it's going to consume the carbohydrates and sugars in our dough and create carbon dioxide and alcohol gas bubbles, which will help the dough rise and expand, and eventually they'll dissolve in the oven during the baking process, creating a honeycomb-like texture. So now that we've done that in this bowl, and that's been sitting for about 10 minutes now, we're going to go ahead and mix some of our other stuff. So we have 2 bowls here, and this is our rubber spatula for mixing. We're going to mix our flour, which was pre-measured. Everything was pre-measured. This is our wheat germ and our salt. So our flour is the bread flour, which is a higher protein than the all-purpose flour. And the more protein, basically, the stronger the bonds for the gluten. So another thing with the gluten is a combination of the glutenin and the gliadin, which are 2 proteins in the endosperm of the flour. And when those combine in the presence of water, they'll create the strong gluten chains that help the dough form and put together. So we also put our wheat germ in here. The wheat germ is a part of the kernel from the wheat, which is removed during the refining process because it's the most mineral and vitamin dense part of it, but it just has these oils in it that keep the shelf life really low if they were added to the flour. So they take those out to preserve the life on the shelf, therefore saving the people money, and then they enrich the flour so that it still has added vitamins and minerals. So the other thing we added was the salt. The salt is going to help absorb some of the extra water and to make the gluten bonds stronger. It's also going to straighten the bonds a little bit and make them tighter so that they are also stronger, and therefore they can hold more gas and they can expand without messing with the structure at all. So once we have this is all mixed to where everything is evenly spread throughout, we're going to make a well in the middle, and we're going to go ahead and add our yeast water mixture with warm water and our honey. So the purpose of the honey is to, 1, provide a sugar for the yeast to react with to form the carbon dioxide gas and the alcohol gas bubbles, and those help the dough expand. And it also sort of helps preserve the shelf life of the bread and keeps it from cracking, and creates it's sort of a natural binding agent a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and add both of these. And this yeast just has to sit for 10 minutes to allow it to react before you put it in. Give it the time. And there's our honey. And so now our gluten bonds are going to start to form when you mix the flour with the water. It's the mixing of the disulfide bonds, which are the sulfur bonds mixed with the amino acid sulfur bonds, and this is going to create that elasticity that we get in the dough. So we're going to go ahead and stir this for a couple minutes. As you can see, the gluten bonds are already starting to form. So now we're just mixing in as much of it as evenly as we can. So once we've mixed all this, the next step is going to be to let the dough sit for a few minutes, probably 3 minutes, and what it's going to do is provide the gluten vacation stage. And during that stage, the gluten is going to be able to relax, and the proteins in the gluten are going to expand instead of being all bunched up. Because right now, as we go ahead and work the dough, the protein bonds are bunched up and tight. So once we let that sit for a minute, it's going to allow them to expand, and the dough is then going to rise even a little bit more. So here's the before picture, and then in a couple minutes we're going to be ready to go ahead and knead it a little bit more and place it on the pan. Okay, you can pause. So this is our finished pizza dough after we finished kneading it and let it set. So now we're going to put it in the oven on 350 for about 5 to 10 minutes, or until your desired crispiness. Alright, so now as you can see, we have some rise in it from the yeast reacting to the heat in the oven. You can see the bubbles going down. And there's our pizza dough. Thanks.